490 BCE, the east gate of the city of Jing. Close your eyes and stand there. The scene is absolute chaos. Ox carts grinding over stone, merchants screaming, soldiers shoving through the mob. The air is thick with dust and noise. It is not peaceful. It is a nightmare. And right there, in the center of this frantic activity, stands a man. He looks completely lost, totally out of place. He is physically imposing, a giant, tall for his time. He stands out. We have a record of this moment. An observer trying to make sense of this stranger turns to a disciple named Zigong. He dissects the man piece by piece. It is a surgically specific description. From the waist up, the observer says, he is a Mount Rushmore of Chinese heroes. He looks like a living legend, a statue come to life, radiating authority and wisdom. But then comes the twist, the punchline. The observer looks down. But from the waist down, he says, he looks like a stray dog, Sangjiagu. In that culture, this is not a casual insult. It is heavy. It implies homelessness. It means he has no master, no one to feed him. He is wandering, scavenging, a total loss of dignity. Later, Zigong nervously repeats this to his master. He expects fury. He expects indignation. Instead, the man throws his head back and laughs. A big, hearty roar. The sage-like appearance is insignificant, he says. But to say I look like a stray dog, that is exactly right. That is exactly right. That laughing stray dog was Confucius. The world would come to know him as Confucius. This story captures the entire paradox of his life. It is difficult to square this image of the self-aware, laughing exile with the stern, bearded statue we see in temples today. This is the man whose philosophy became the operating system for East Asian civilization for 2,000 years. An unbelievable legacy. But he died, convinced he was a complete and utter failure. He spent the prime of his life as a homeless wanderer, mocked, ignored, chased out of towns by warlords. He was not a sage sitting serenely on a mountaintop. He was down in the mud of a political and social nightmare, desperate to find anyone who would listen. Today, we are going to get past the fortune cookie sayings. We are going to track the real life of the man, the political backstabbing, the assassination attempts, the heartbreaking personal tragedies. We will uncover the incredible resilience that allowed this stray dog to become the uncrowned king. Welcome to History Titans. If you want to uncover the grit behind the legends, make sure you subscribe and join us now. Let us begin. To really get him, you first have to understand the world he was born into, the world that broke him. He was born into an era known as the Spring and Autumn period. It sounds lovely, like a pastoral poem. You picture people having picnics under willow trees. It was the exact opposite. The name is a historical accident. The reality was terrifying. Roughly 770 to 476 BCE. The great Zhou dynasty, the bedrock of stability for centuries, had disintegrated. The king of Zhou was still on his throne, but he was a puppet, a figurehead with no armies and no money. Real authority had shattered into the hands of dozens of feuding states. It was a free-for-all, every state for itself. A constant, grinding civil war defined by assassination, betrayal, and intrigue. The sources from that time use one phrase to describe it: the collapse of rights and music. To modern ears, that sounds abstract, as if the symphony is simply out of tune. But it meant something much darker. It was an existential crisis. Rights and music, Li and Yue, were not just ceremony. They were the structure of society, the social contract. When they said the rights had collapsed, they meant the fundamental rules of human decency were gone. Sons murdered fathers for titles. Ministers poisoned rulers to usurp thrones. Social distinctions meant nothing. Brute force was the only law. It was Game of Thrones without the dragons. Into this brutal world steps Confucius. His mission was critical. He did not see himself as a prophet or a messiah. He was a transmitter, not a creator. He wanted to hit the reset button, not write new code. He believed the blueprint for a perfect, harmonious society already existed in the golden age of the early Zhou. People had simply forgotten how to read it. His life's work was an attempt to restore the rituals, the propriety, to save his world from tearing itself apart. So let us go back to the beginning. Where did this force of nature come from? He was not born a sage on a pedestal. Far from it. He was born in 551 BCE in a small town called Zhu, near the city of Khufu, in the state of Lu. Today, that is in Shandong province. His family situation was complicated. His father was a man named Kong He, also known as Shu Liang He, a local legend, a military commander known for incredible physical strength. There is a famous story of him during a siege, holding up a massive, falling portcullis, a heavy city gate, with his bare hands so his soldiers could escape. A superhero story. It paints a picture of a martial lineage, but there is a catch. Shu Liang. He was old when Confucius was born, around 70. His mother, Yan Zhengzai, was a very young woman, maybe 15 or 16, a massive age gap. Some sources describe their union as wild or irregular. It suggests Confucius may have been illegitimate, or at least born of a union not socially sanctioned by the main family. He was on the outside from the very beginning. Then the floor drops out. His father died when Confucius was just 3 years old. With his death, the family lost everything. Their protector, their status, their income. They were plunged into poverty overnight. Confucius was not a pampered aristocrat, theorizing from an ivory tower. He belonged to a class known as the Shi. Think of them as the lowest rung on the nobility's ladder. Not commoners, not peasants. They had a lineage and a family name. But they had no land, no hereditary wealth. They were a class of scholar knights, warrior administrators. They had to make themselves useful to survive. They were the professional class, the gig economy workers of ancient China in a way. You had to have a skill. You served as a functionary in a lord's court, a military officer, or a specialist in rituals. Because his family was poor, Confucius had to hustle from a young age. The records are quite clear on this. He worked as a granary keeper, basically an accountant. He also worked as a caretaker for livestock. I just love the image of the future great sage counting grain sacks and yelling at sheep. It grounded him in a way the high nobility never were. He said later in life, "When I was young, my condition was humble. That is why I am skilled in many menial things." He understood what it meant to work. He knew the price of a bag of rice. But he clearly did not want to be a bookkeeper his whole life. He says that at age 15, he set his heart on learning. And learning back then was not just about reading books in a library. It was a whole body experience. This was the curriculum of the 6 arts. It was the complete education for a gentleman, a junzi. It included the things you would expect: ritual, music, calligraphy, mathematics. But it also included archery and charioteering. Wait, charioteering. So we have to picture Confucius as athletic. We have to completely erase the image of the frail, stooped old scholar. Remember his father's genes. Confucius was, by all accounts, tall and strong. Driving a war chariot at speed is an incredibly demanding physical skill. It requires balance, core strength, and immense focus. So he could handle himself. He was not just a bookworm. He was physically formidable. And that really changes how you read his philosophy. When he talks about discipline, it is not just mental, it is physical discipline too. Ritual is something you perform with your body. But the real defining moment, the event that seems to forge his entire worldview, comes a bit later. At 19, he married a woman named Lady Qiguan, and they had a son. But at 23, his mother died. This leads to what you could call his crucible, the 3-year mourning period. In the ancient Zhou tradition he so admired, a son was expected to withdraw from public life for 3 full years after a parent's death. 3 years. That is a massive commitment. A huge career break for a young, ambitious man trying to make his way out of poverty. By Confucius's time, most people were cutting corners on this ritual. They would do it for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then get back to business. It was seen as impractical. But not for him. Confucius did it by the book, strictly, He supposedly built a hut by his mother's grave. He wore coarse sackcloth. He ate simple food like porridge. He did not engage in any music or festivities for 3 years. What was he doing in that hut for all that time? Just grieving? No, that was his research period. His self-imposed PhD program. He was deep in the ancient texts, studying history, music, poetry, and ritual. He was asking the big question. Why did our world fall apart? And he found his answer there. When he emerged from that seclusion, his philosophy was effectively set in stone. He was absolutely convinced that the abandonment of proper ritual, the abandonment of Li, was the root cause of all the chaos and violence in the world. Let us really drill down on Li for a second, because again, to a modern listener, ritual can sound like empty ceremony, like knowing which fork to use at a fancy dinner. Why did he think that was the key to stopping warlords from murdering each other? That is the central question of his entire philosophy. For Confucius, Li is not just about external manners. It is social grammar. It is the framework that shapes our inner character. It is a kind of behavioral training. Exactly, it is like behavioral psychology. The idea is that if you consistently perform external acts of respect, bowing to an elder, using the proper form of address, yielding to someone in a doorway, you are physically training your mind to be less selfish, more aware of others. You practice it until you become it. Fake it till you make it, in a way. He believed that human nature was not inherently good or bad, but it was perfectible. And Li was the technology for perfecting it. If you could fix the microscopic interactions between people, father and son, ruler and subject, then the macroscopic friction in society, like war, would become impossible. So he comes out of this 3-year mourning period, armed with this social technology, and he starts to teach. And in doing so, he does something truly revolutionary. Before Confucius, education was a privilege of the aristocracy. You learned because of who your father was. Confucius blew that wide open. He famously said, "In teaching, there should be no distinction of classes." This is where the famous bundle of dried meat comes in. He said he would teach anyone, no matter how poor, as long as they could offer a token payment. A bundle of dried meat. It was a symbolic tuition fee. It basically meant, I will teach anyone who is sincere. I do not care about your bloodline. I do not care about your wealth. I care about your desire to learn and improve yourself. He was, for all intents and purposes, the first private teacher in Chinese history. He democratized wisdom, and he attracted a pretty diverse group of followers, a real motley crew. You had men like Zilu, who was this sort of rough ex-criminal type, who became his most loyal and fierce protector, the bodyguard. Then you had Zigong, a brilliant merchant and diplomat, who was very worldly and often bankrolled their travels. And then you had his favorite, Yan Hui, the quiet, impoverished genius who just got it. Yan Hui was the one who understood, the favorite disciple, the genius who grasped the master's teachings on an intuitive level. But for Confucius, simply being a teacher was never the ultimate goal. He wanted to put these ideas into practice. He wanted to govern. He was not an academic. He was a political reformer, desperate to find a ruler who would give him a chance. He needed to prove his principles worked in the real world, and eventually, he got his shot. By his early 50s, his reputation had grown. The situation in his home state of Lu was dire. The Duke of Lu was a figurehead, a total puppet. The real power was held by 3 immensely powerful hereditary families: the Ji clan, the Ming clan, and the Shu clan. Think of them as 3 mafia families who had carved up the state for themselves. And somehow, Confucius manages to rise through the ranks. He becomes the minister of crime, the minister of justice. It is a powerful position, essentially in charge of law and order. And this is where we see that he was not just a gentle philosopher. He had steel in him, a lot of steel. One of his first and most controversial acts was to order the execution of a high-ranking official named Xiao Zhengmao. He had a man executed. That does not sound very Confucian to modern ears, But from his perspective, it was entirely necessary. Xiao Zhengmao was a demagogue. He was clever, charismatic, and popular. But Confucius saw him as a corrupting influence who was undermining the state's moral fabric with deceitful words. For the sake of social order, he had to go. For Confucius, order was paramount. Virtue without the strength to enforce it was useless. You could not be soft when the health of the entire state was at risk. You have to cut out the cancer. And according to the historical accounts, his policies worked. The records say that under his administration, crime plummeted. Merchants stopped cheating on their weights and measures. Things became so orderly that lost items left on the road were not stolen. Lu started to become strong. It started to become well-governed. And that, ironically, became the source of his downfall. The neighboring state, Qi, started to get nervous. They looked over at Lu and realized that if Confucius continued this reform, Lu would become a superpower, a threat. They had to sabotage him, but they did not send an army. So they sent something far more insidious, a party. It is one of the most brilliant acts of political sabotage in history. The state of Qi carefully selected 80 of the most beautiful and talented female musicians and dancers in their kingdom. They gathered 120 of the finest horses. They sent them all as a gift to the Duke of Lu. The plan was simple: distraction, and it worked perfectly. The Duke of Lu, a man of weak moral character, was completely mesmerized. He abandoned his duties. He stopped holding court with his ministers. For 3 days, he did nothing but watch the women dance and admire the horses. And then came the final insult: the incident with the sacrificial meat. This was the breaking point. After a solemn state sacrifice to heaven, it was ritual protocol for the Duke to distribute portions of the blessed meat to his ministers. It was a symbolic act of unity. It said, "We are all part of this government together." But the Duke was so infatuated with his new entertainment that he forgot. He neglected to send Confucius his portion of the meat. To an outsider, this sounds petty. He quit his job because his boss did not give him a piece of barbecue. It sounds absurd. But for Confucius, this was everything. It was the ultimate breach of Li. It was a clear signal that the Duke had chosen personal pleasure over his sacred duties. The moral core of the state was rotten. Confucius realized, "I cannot work for this man. My project is doomed here." He knew it was over. The way he left is heartbreaking. He did not storm out in a huff. The texts say he left slowly. He lingered. He walked slowly toward the city gates, constantly looking back over his shoulder. He was hoping against hope that the Duke would realize his mistake. He was praying for a messenger to come galloping after him, begging him to return. He wanted to be called back, desperately. He wanted the Duke to choose duty over dancers. But the messenger never came. No one came. And so, in 497 BCE, at the age of 55, when most men are thinking about slowing down, Confucius walked out of the gates of his home state and into exile. This is the beginning of the Great Wandering, 14 years on the road. This is the stray dog period of his life. He and his band of disciples became a mobile academy, a government in exile. They traveled from state to state, Wei, Song, Chen, Kai. They searched for a ruler, any ruler, who would be willing to listen and implement his way. It was just one brutal rejection after another. Let us talk about some of the famous stops. He gets to the state of Wei and meets its ruler, Duke Ling. Duke Ling is an interesting character, old, clever, but deeply corrupt and frivolous. He gives Confucius an audience, but he is not interested in virtue or ritual. In the middle of their conversation, the Duke interrupts and asks, "Master, could you advise me on military tactics? Tell me about troop formations." This is the one thing Confucius refuses to talk about. He sees war as the ultimate failure of good governance. His reply is famously curt. He says, "I have heard a little about the arrangement of ceremonial vessels, but I have not studied military matters." And then what? He packs his bags and leaves the very next day. He is unemployed, essentially homeless. Yet he turns down a potential job because it violates his principles. That is integrity. But his time and way also includes the scandal with Lady Nancy, the wicked consort. Let us talk about her. Lady Nancy. She was the Duke's wife. Beautiful, powerful, infamous for her political intrigues and her many love affairs. She held enormous influence, and she demanded a meeting with Confucius. His disciples were not happy, especially Zilu, the bodyguard. Zilu was furious. He was a moral purist. He saw this as a stain on his master's reputation. Why is the master meeting with this immoral woman? But Confucius went. He understood political reality. He had to go. The meeting itself is mysterious. It took place with a screen between them. He could not see her. The only thing the records mention is the sound of her jade pendants chiming as she moved, a cinematic detail. But when Confucius came out, Zilu confronted him. He accused him of compromising his values. Confucius got so defensive he had to swear a solemn oath to the heavens. He cried out, "If I have done wrong, may heaven reject me. May heaven reject me." It shows the immense pressure he was under, not just from the outside world, but from his own followers. And then the pressure becomes physical danger. They travel to the state of Song. There is a man there named Huan Tui, the minister of war. He despises Confucius. He sees him as a threat. Confucius preaches that legitimacy comes from morality, not military might. Men like Huan Tui, whose power is based entirely on violence, cannot scan that message. So he decides to get rid of him. Then one day, Confucius is teaching his disciples under the shade of a large tree. Huan Tui sends his soldiers. They start chopping the tree down, while he is sitting right there. It was a clear assassination attempt, or at the very least, a terrifying act of intimidation. The tree comes crashing down. The disciples are panicking. They scream, "Master, we have to run." And Confucius? He is completely calm, ice in his veins. He does not even flinch. He looks at his panicked students and says, "Heaven produced the virtue that is in me. What can Huan Tui do to me?" That is an incredible level of faith. He genuinely believed he was protected by a higher power. He believed he was the sole vessel for the culture of the ancients. He had a sense of destiny that made him fearless. But that fearlessness was truly put to the test in the states of Chen and Kai. This is universally described as the absolute lowest point of the entire journey, the nadir. They found themselves trapped between two warring armies in the wilderness, surrounded, besieged. They ran out of food completely. For 7 days, they had nothing to eat. The disciples were starving, weak, falling ill. They could not even stand up. And Zilu, the loyal but impulsive Zilu, finally snaps. He has had enough. He storms into Confucius's tent, furious and desperate. He shouts, "Does the gentleman also find himself in poverty?" It is a profound question. He is asking, "Master, we have done everything right. We followed the way. Why is this happening to us? What was the point of all this virtue if we just die in a ditch?" It is a question of Job. No, why do bad things happen to good people? And while Zilu is having this crisis of faith, what is Confucius doing? He is calmly playing his lute and singing. That must have driven Zilu insane, but Confucius stops playing. He looks at him. He delivers one of his most important lessons. He says, "The gentleman remains steadfast in poverty. The small man, when in poverty, is swept away." The test of character is not whether you face hardship. The test is how you face it. Everyone suffers. But a small man will abandon all his principles. He will lie, cheat, and steal as soon as things get tough. A junzi, a gentleman, maintains his dignity and his integrity even when he is starving. He turned their starvation into a final exam on his philosophy. It was in this period, after years of rejection and hardship, that the stray dog incident took place. So being called a stray dog was not an insult anymore. It was just an accurate description of his life. He was a survivor. So after 14 long years of this, he finally gets the call to come home. In 484 BCE, he is 68 years old. One of his former disciples, Ran Qiu, has become a successful official in the service of the Ji family in Lu. He arranges for the master's return, but it is not a triumphant comeback. He's not being invited back to run the government. Not at all. They bring him back as a trophy. They give him the honorary title of State Elder. It basically means, please sit in the corner, look venerable, and give us some prestige. But for heaven's sake, do not touch the actual levers of power. That is it exactly. He was respected, but given no real authority. At this point, he finally realized his political dream was dead. He was never going to get the chance to reform a state, so he pivots. If he cannot directly change the present, he will focus on shaping the future. This is when he begins his great literary work. He dedicates his final years to collecting, editing, and preserving the canonical texts of Zhou culture. He is trying to create a curriculum for future generations. He edits the Book of Songs, the Book of Documents, and most importantly, he compiles, and some say writes, the Spring and Autumn Annals, the history of his own state of Lu. You might think this book sounds like a dry chronicle, but it is actually written in a kind of code. It is written in what scholars call the Chunqiu Bifa, the Spring and Autumn style. It is a method of delivering incredibly subtle but powerful moral judgments through very precise word choices. Let us explain how that works with an example. Say a duke is assassinated. If the annals simply state the Duke of Qi died, it is a neutral statement. But if it says a minister of Qi murdered his lord, that is an explicit condemnation. But the real subtlety comes in what is omitted. If a usurper kills a duke and the annals record it as X killed Y, using the duke's personal name but omitting his title duke, it is a devastating judgment. It implies the man was so unworthy he did not even deserve his title. He was not a real duke. Confucius was acting as a historian and a judge, handing down verdicts that would last for eternity. He believed that by rectifying the names of the past, he could provide a moral compass for the future. A single word from his brush could praise or condemn a figure for all time. But while he is engaged in this monumental intellectual project, his personal world collapses. These last years are a tragedy. It is one devastating blow after another. First, in 482 BCE, his only son, Kong Li, dies. We do not know much about their relationship, but Confucius is now an old man burying his child. That is crushing enough, but then comes the one that truly breaks him. The death of Yan Hui. This was the one he could not recover from. Yan Hui was his favorite, his spiritual heir, the one disciple he felt truly understood him. He had pinned all his hopes for the future transmission of his way on Yan Hui, and Yan Hui dies young. When Confucius gets the news, he loses all his famous composure. The Analects record that he wept uncontrollably, wailing, "Heaven has destroyed me! Heaven has destroyed me!" He felt that his entire life's work had died with that young man. He felt heaven had taken his successor, and his legacy was doomed. And then, just a year later, the final blow lands. Zilu, his loyal, brash, brave bodyguard, the one who was always arguing with him, but would have died for him in a second. Zilu had taken a post in the state of Wei, and he gets caught up in a violent coup. He dies defending his lord. The details of his death are horrific. He is hopelessly outnumbered in the fight. During the battle, the chin strap of his official cap is cut, and he stops fighting to fix it, he says. A gentleman does not allow his cap to be askew upon death. He is literally being hacked to pieces, and his last act is to adjust his hat to maintain proper ritual form. He was then killed, and his body was minced. It is horrifying, but it is also the ultimate expression of the philosophy. He died for Li. When the news got back to Confucius, an already grieving old man, he was shattered. There is a detail that says in those days, a common food was pickled meat, minced meat in brine. When Confucius heard that Zilu had been minced, he ordered every jar of pickled meat in his house to be thrown away. He could not even look at it. He has lost his son, his spiritual heir, and now his protector. He is alone. He is a broken man, and he knows the end is near for him too. In 479 BCE, one morning, he gets up and is seen shuffling around his courtyard, leaning on a staff. He sings a haunting little song to himself. Mount Tai is crumbling. The strong beam is breaking. The wise man is withering away. He was composing his own eulogy. He told his disciple Zigong that he had a dream the night before. He was sitting between two pillars where a coffin would be placed for funeral rites. He said, "I think my time has come." 7 days later, he died. He was 71 or 72 years old. At that exact moment, if you were a historian taking a snapshot of the world, you would have concluded this man was a failure. An absolute failure. He never got the political position he wanted. His home state was still a mess. His philosophy seemed too idealistic and impractical for a brutal world. He died thinking nobody understood him. So how on earth do we get from that dying, forgotten old man to the single most influential figure in East Asian history? It started with the devotion of his disciples. They refused to let his memory die. They mourned him for 3 years, as if he were their own father. And Zigong, the merchant, went even further. Zigong was so overcome with grief that after the official 3-year mourning period was over, he built a small hut by his master's grave and lived there, alone, for another 3 years. 6 years in total. It shows the sheer force of Confucius's personality, the love he inspired. After the mourning, they began to gather. They started compiling their memories of him, fragments of conversations, anecdotes, lessons he had taught. This collection becomes the Lunyu, the Analects. Confucius never wrote down his own philosophy. The Analects is a scrapbook compiled by his students and their students over decades. It is a testament to their memory of him. No, but even then, for a long time, Confucianism was just one school of thought among many. And the next dynasty, the Fian, actively tried to stamp it out. The Han dynasty, which unified China in 221 BCE, was a legalist state. They believed in rule by harsh law, brute force, and absolute state control. They saw Confucianism, with its emphasis on morality and virtue, as a direct threat. This is the famous burning of the books and burying of the scholars. They systematically destroyed Confucian texts and executed Confucian scholars. They wanted to erase his influence completely. But the Qin dynasty was incredibly brutal, and it collapsed very quickly. It burned too bright and burned out fast. When the new Han dynasty rose from the ashes, they had a huge problem. They needed an ideology to govern a vast, unified empire. The Qin's legalism was too cruel, but the old Zhou feudalism was too weak. They needed a new operating system. A scholar named Dong Zhongshu stepped forward and made the perfect pitch to the great Emperor Wu of Han. He argued that Confucianism was the ideal philosophy for an empire. Why? Because it teaches hierarchy, respect for authority, loyalty to the ruler. It frames the emperor as the son of heaven. But there is a key. It also puts a moral check on that power. It says the ruler must be virtuous and care for his people to maintain the mandate of heaven. It was the perfect blend of authority and responsibility. The Han dynasty made it the official state orthodoxy. And then they created the tool that would cement its influence forever: the civil service examination system. This is the real game changer. It is everything. And for the next 2,000 years, with a few interruptions, the only way to get a job in the Chinese government, the only path to power, wealth, and prestige, was to master the Confucian classics. You had to memorize the words of the man who died unemployed, the ultimate historical irony. The stray dog, who was rejected by every ruler of his day, became the mandatory teacher for every official and emperor for 2 millennia. His influence spread far beyond China, to Korea, to Japan, to Vietnam. The entire cultural sphere of East Asia is built on a foundation of Confucian values. The emphasis on education, on family and filial piety, on social harmony. It is all part of his DNA, so let us bring it all back to where we started. That image of the stray dog. It really is the perfect metaphor for his life. He was cast out. He was wandering without a home. He was scavenging for an audience in a world that did not want him. But a stray dog is also resilient. It survives. It keeps going. Confucius had the seemingly naive belief that one person's sincere effort at moral self-improvement could eventually ripple outwards and transform an entire society. He never got to see it happen. But the ripple he started turned into a tidal wave that reshaped a civilization. He chose integrity when power was easy. He walked away from the Duke of Lu rather than compromise his principles. In an age of chaos and violence, he bet everything on the simple, radical idea that human beings could and should be better. The fact that we are still talking about him 2,500 years later suggests he won that bet. His real victory was not political. It was educational. The stray dog finally found his home. It was in the mind of a culture for generations to come. If you enjoyed this journey, tracking the master from wandering exile to the architect of the Eastern mind, please make sure to subscribe to History Titans. We are building a whole library of the world's most compelling lives, and you will not want to miss who we explore next. And leave us a comment below. We have a question for you. Do you think Confucius would have actually been a successful ruler if a duke had finally given him total control? Or was his exile and failure necessary for his philosophy to mature into what it became? We would love to know what you think. Thanks for joining us for this exploration. We will see you next time.